Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. I just got finished watching Birth of a Nation, and I'm going to do this brief review of that film. For me, this didn't feel like a movie. It felt more like an actual experience, a traumatic experience, a terrifying experience. And immediately after I saw this film, the first thought that entered my mind is that I cannot watch any more slavery movies. I think this is my last slavery movie. I can't deal with it. It's too much. It's too intense. And I think that because of our ancestral memory, it triggers something within us. When I watched this movie, there were moments when I was so enraged that I wanted to act upon my rage. I wanted to take action. There were moments in this movie where I felt like crying, where I almost shedded tears. I mean, there are some intense scenes in this movie. And the thing about it is, I think this movie wasn't as intense as it could have been. But even so, it was still very intense. Even though they didn't show all the details and all the brutality of slavery, you still felt the intensity of the movie. I can't imagine how the film would have been if they showed more detail about slavery. It would have been even worse. There's a couple of scenes that stand out to me, a couple of things that were said in the film. There's a section of the film where this brother is told that the master wants him to bring his wife into the big house to serve one of the guests in the big house. Not to serve the guests food, not to provide like ordinary maid type of slave service, but this master wanted this man's wife to come into the big house so that she could be raped by one of the guests. And this black man was in a position where he could not do anything about the situation. He was forced to watch his wife go into the big house. He was forced to watch that happen. Forced to see his wife leave the big house in tears after being raped by the slave master's guests. And at some point, I don't remember if it was right after she was raped or before she was raped, this brother asked Nat Turner, "Where is God now? Where is God now?" And the reason why that question is so important is because Nat Turner was like a pastor, at least in the film. And I haven't done enough research about the actual facts. I know that he was a preacher, but I don't know if how they told the story was accurate in this film. But Nat Turner was a preacher. So he's asking this preacher, where is God now? Where is God now? And in this film, Nat Turner is a preacher. He goes from plantation to plantation, preaching to the slaves for compensation. And the compensation obviously goes to the slave master. But he's going from plantation to plantation, preaching submission to the slave master. Basically telling people to be obedient to your master, citing scripture, saying such. So again, this slave asked Nat Turner, where is God now? And that just makes me think about so many things. It just makes me wonder, what just and merciful God would condone slavery? What just and merciful God would condone slavery? There are verses in the Bible condoning slavery. There are verses in the Quran that make it clear that slavery is not forbidden. And I struggle with that. I wonder, why would any just God permit slavery? And why would a just God allow this evil to exist in the world that we see? Why would a just God allow the damn white man to kidnap us from our motherland, strip us of our language, our culture, our religions, our very humanity, beat us, rape us, kill us? Why would a just God allow that to happen? Why would a just God allow that to happen? That's what I think about. And this movie, again, it wasn't like a movie, it was like an actual experience. And from what I understand from watching the movie, it seemed like they didn't even tell the full story of the actual brutality of slavery. We only saw a glimpse of it. And that mere glimpse of the brutality of slavery was enough to terrify me, enough to enrage me, enough to make me say, I don't want to see any more of these films anymore. I can't watch another slave movie after this. I refuse to. When you go to the movies, often you expect it to be not only entertained, but you expect to feel good after seeing a movie. You expect some kind of hope or optimism to come out of a movie after watching it. But I didn't feel that after I saw this. And anybody who knows about the history of Nat Turner understands that there was no good ending coming in this film. But just actually watching the film just left me with a sense of defeat. It created an image that perpetuates the concept of resistance being futile. That's how I felt. It felt like hopelessness. And that made me even more enraged. But I will say this. The moment when those men, those slaves, decided that they wouldn't be slaves anymore, that was the moment that they were free. When they said that we are going to resist our slave master, we're going to rise up and rebel against this institution of slavery. At that very minute, at that very moment, those brothers were free. They were free. The slave masters may have killed their bodies, but they didn't kill their spirit. They didn't kill the spirit of rebellion that is still within us today. There's a part in the movie where they say that the ancestors and the unborn children will rejoice at, at the sight of this rebellion. And that's what we do. We rejoice. Because we're all destined to die. And if you're going to die anyway, what better way to die than to die fighting for freedom? There's no better death than that. There's nothing more beautiful than martyrdom. So yeah, those are my thoughts about this film. And and all I could think about is those scenes from this movie where a black man was powerless because he didn't have guns. He didn't have the same resources as that white man had. So that white man was able to impose his will, rape the black man's women, and completely humiliate the black man. But for that brief moment in time when those brothers rebelled against the slave master and showed the slave master no mercy, for those brief 48 hours, those brothers were men. They reclaimed their manhood and they cleansed themselves with the blood of the enemy. And I felt no mercy for those slave masters being killed. None at all. And in the movie theater where I was, during those brutal scenes, many of our people were cheering. They were clapping. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. Because for that 48 hours, those men were men. They were protecting themselves and they were fighting for the liberation of them and their families. As I watched these white men in the movie abuse these black women, I thought to myself, what black woman in her right mind would want to be with the damn slave master? What black woman in her right mind would want to be with the damn slave master? I mean, I can't imagine like what kind of thoughts go through those people's heads when they go see a movie like this with their white husband. That's what I wonder. And there's a scene in a movie where a young slave betrays Nat Turner and the other rebels. And he basically becomes an agent and he runs to the slave master and tells the slave master about the plot. And as a result of this agent among the slaves, as a result of that, all these rebels were killed by the slave master. And Nat Turner was killed. And not only was he killed, they flayed him and they actually took parts of his body as souvenirs. They don't show that in the film, but there's a caption that says that. It lets people know about how this rebellion ended. And that just reminded me about the agents amongst us. And while we can't embrace these agents, we can't try to convert these agents or negotiate with these agents. We have to purge our community of these agents amongst us, these enemies amongst us. Because as long as they are among us, selling us out, working against the interests of the collective, then we'll never prosper as a people. Every nation has a way of dealing with traitors, and we have to deal with ours. We can't pretend that because these people have the same pigment as us, that somehow that means that we have to accept them. No, these enemies need to be called out. They need to be expelled from our community. So those are just some of my thoughts about this film. If you've seen the film, tell me what you thought about it. You know, I'm interested in hearing your perspective. And I just wonder, like, what was the intent behind Fox News, or was Fox purchasing this film? What was their intent? Was it to break our spirit?